All right, folks, welcome to our first ever LinkedIn Live. I'm Rafat Ali, the CEO and founder of Skift, and we're delighted to welcome all of you to this. This is our first, I would say, experimental session, only because we've never done this before live on LinkedIn. And you may see some glitches. I hope you don't, but if you do, please excuse us as we're trying to learn this. And we'll do a lot more of this. So the first session that we wanted to do was, obviously we're sitting at the start of 2023. I mean, it's already February, almost mid-Feb. And there's a lot of uncertainty in the market about where travel is going to go. Travel industry, travelers are going to go as the larger economy tremors in many different ways around the world. And obviously every story you read has a different conclusion of what the economy is going to be. So our research will try and answer some of these questions. Skift Research, which is the research arm of Skift, does a lot of consumer research on where traveler sentiments are today. And we will discuss that based on surveys and research that we've done on the traveler sentiment in US. So just to be clear, this is US specific data that we're talking about. We've been doing this US travel tracker since January 2020. And we do this every 2 months to understand. This is a detailed survey of about 1,000 travelers in US on what their intent is and all types of booking behavior and destination, etc. So we ask a bunch of these questions, and we've been doing this US travel tracker. If you are a subscriber to Skift Research, you probably would have seen this. If you're not, now is your time to subscribe to Skift Research. If you go to research.skift.com, you'll see it. And so with me to discuss the latest traveler sentiment and what to expect from travelers and how travel marketers should be thinking about this is our our senior research analysts, Varsha Arora and Pranavi Agarwal. They are on top of this for you, and we're going to dive right into it. So again, just to remind, the premise is, what is the traveler sentiment for 2023 in light of all this uncertainty around us? So let me throw it to Varsha. You are in charge of the US Travel Tracker of Consumer Research at Skift Research for us. Can you talk about the top line findings? This was the latest findings in the research, in the surveys that we did in January 2023.
Sure, Rafat. To begin with, I would just want to highlight how the economic uncertainty is actually weighing on the travel expectations, because that's what we are here for. So just to set the background, since August 2021, more than around half the Americans continue to think that the economic situation in US is actually going to worsen in the next 12 months. So Brian, if you can get the first slide.
Yep, it's on now.
Yeah, so as you can see, as per our survey findings, since January 2022, more people think their personal economic situation will get worse than people who think that will get better in the next 12 months. So that sort of shows the economic anxiety, like the anxiety people have around the economic situation in the country. However, if we can bring up the next slide, please. However, as you can see in this chart, our survey data from January to October 2022 suggested that the worries around personal economic situation actually did not have a direct impact on the travel behavior or travel spending for that matter. But what has recently changed is that the share of respondents in our survey who are expecting to, actually travel, expecting to reduce the travel spend, decrease the travel spend in the next 12 months, and that percentage rose by 10 percentage points from 24% in October 2022 versus 34% in January 2023, hinting that the fears of recession and an elevated inflation will actually weigh on the travel plans of the Americans. I would want my colleague Pranavi to shed some light on the macroeconomic situation.
Yeah, I'll weigh in here. So yeah, from a macro perspective, I think we can totally understand why travel sentiment has worsened. Fear of recession remains high, personal saving rates have dwindled, and the government stimulus checks, which kind of people received in 2020, that has been spent in 2022. And as a result, consumer spending is now slowing thanks to high interest rates, while inflation remains elevated. However, I think it's really interesting to compare this to travel companies. The travel companies, they continue to push a really bullish message, and travel stocks are up nearly 30% since January. So how do you kind of square that circle between the uncertainty and the strong stock performance year to date? Well, I think ultimately from us on the side of Skift Research, we think there are reasons to be optimistic. Yes, inflation is high, but it eased in December for the sixth consecutive month, and that has, helped. That has buoyed stock markets this year. And then also, I think a big driver of spending on discretionary items such as travel is if you look at the unemployment rate. Unemployment rate is currently at a half-century low. It's at 3.4%, meaning that people continue to have jobs and they continue to have money in order to spend on things like travel. This is kind of unlike the 2008, 2009 recession when unemployment rate hit more than 10% as people lost their jobs. So I think it's important to keep in mind that this is, if you do enter a recession into 2023, it's a recession unlike other recessions that we have seen in the past. And then I think it's also important to remember that travel is inherently a luxury consumer spend item, and that makes it somewhat protected in a recession. So I think the data shows that more than half of spending on lodging in the US is actually done by the top quintile of income earners who are protected when it comes to inflation and high interest rates. And then lastly, there's a lot of pent-up demand. I know people are really sick of hearing it, but it's true. There's Asia has just opened up. International travel is still far below 2019 levels, and business travel will be a lot more resilient than people have feared. And then also there are more tailwinds this time around that weren't there before in 08, 09, such as remote travel, digital nomads. So I think there's a lot to be optimistic, and I think it's there's a lot of reasons to have a positive outlook for travel into 2023, despite the kind of fears of recession and kind of weakening travel sentiment demand that we've seen.
Varsha, from your perspective, we're one of the things that Pranavi talked about, which is even if, let's say, the US and Western Europe stumbles a little bit in 2023, there's enough other parts of the world. Middle East is booming. There were just numbers I think we wrote on today about Dubai having almost the same number of visitors as 2019, and they have big growth numbers. Obviously, Saudi has big growth numbers as well. India is booming, at least domestically, and we'll see what happens internationally outbound. We've been talking about this on Skift and Skift Research quite a bit. And then China, which is just beginning to open up, and you'll hopefully see a flood of tourists. So from your perspective, what are those positive things that the travel marketer should be thinking about, and how should they think about that?
I mean, if I go back to my survey findings, I would want to stress on the point that although, yes, people are willing to spend less on travel this year, it is slightly better than what it was in 2022. So if I'm right, 40% of people were actually wanting to spend less on travel in 2022, while around half of them are wanting to spend less this year. So I would say overall the situation is getting better. And yes, travel, what all points that Pranavi mentioned, travel remains insulated from the economic shocks, which are impending this year, I would say. So yeah, I mean, the overall situation is positive, in my opinion. And as you mentioned, the main driver of this growth would be Asia reopening. I mean, we have stressed enough on this point in our mega trends and other presentations that Skift has given in the last 1 month. So, I mean, we are cautiously optimistic about how travel is going to shape up this year.
And since we're talking primarily about the U.S. traveler sentiment, and this in this case would be domestic travel as well as U.S. outbound, one of the things that many travel marketers and travel companies are worried about is obviously the pricing remains very high, whether it's for airfares and hotels. And so do you see any reset happening there, Pranavi or Varsha, in terms of travel pricing, discounting? I know this was some of the research that you did as well.
Sure, I would want to take this one. Brian, if you can actually get us the next slide online, please. I mean, so Rafat, travel behavior is definitely changing, and our survey findings do validate that. I mean, in January, about half of the respondents said that they thought that the prices are increasing. They're higher now as compared to last year. 66% of those people actually have changed their travel behavior, and how? Basically, one third of them are picking up less expensive destinations. They are cutting down on their in-destination spending. 20% of the travelers actually cancelled or just postponed their trips altogether. But what the interesting part here is what we've noticed is that an increasing number of people are actually booking a vacation due to discounted pricing, meaning that discounting might become more effective again in 2023 and actually turn out to be a very powerful sales tool for the travel suppliers, travel players, and the destinations. And they might just want to stress on this discounting part and actually use it
And I guess
this year.
the one of the things that happened during COVID that we saw was the booking window shrunk quite a bit.
Right.
So much so that obviously flexibility became a huge thing for travelers to be in terms of in terms of the ticket, the types of rules around the tickets, and so it seems like historically discounting has been more there towards the latter half of the window, and it seems like what could happen and what may be happening is discounting is moving a little bit more towards the front end of the window, which is book now because this is as good as going to be, versus rates that are going to increase quite dramatically. We certainly saw that happen last year particularly with the airline tickets. So I don't know if you have any views in terms of where the discounting moves in the window.
Yeah, I'll weigh in here. I think, yes, prices have definitely gone up far above pre-COVID levels. And, given the economic environment, there is definitely more demand for discounted holidays. And we might see that primarily kind of domestically. And we might see some trading down happen kind of down the chain scales. And we might see some discounting kind of more top of the funnel rather than towards the bottom. I think when we talk about discounting and kind of rates, I think it's really important to look at who the beneficiaries will be in the travel landscape, which players are going to benefit from this. And I think it's interesting to look back at the last recession, 08, 09, and that's really when the OTAs came into the fray. They gained market share, came out a really dominant player. But in 08, 09, it was a rates game. Right, hotels were looking to fill beds in any way they could, and the OTAs really took advantage of that. They came in, they offered discounted rates in order to attract consumers and kind of raise occupancy levels. I think this time around, it's a completely different ball game. Today pricing is leading occupancy, whilst in
Right.
08, 09, it was occupancy that led the recovery. So it's completely the opposite. And obviously during COVID, there was no point lowering rates as it wouldn't see any incremental demand because there were lockdowns, restrictions, whatever. So yeah, I think whilst we are seeing discounting becoming more of a factor now, I don't think it means that the OTAs will automatically be the kind of the
driver
player.
here.
Yeah, the player that's going to gain all the share this time round. We've seen that direct bookings have gained a lot of share through COVID. And Google, I mean, that's a big player that wasn't around in 08, 09. And their role in helping independent hotels kind of distribute rooms directly is completely different to what we've seen before. And the competition is a lot more intense now. I think the hotels are that they're a little bit more on tune about what's happening, and I think they got maybe a little bit complacent in 08, 09 to let the OTAs gain so much share. And I think it's quite interesting. At our Skift Global Forum last year, Glenn Fogel said that travel is the most competitive industry in the world, and I mean that's definitely true, and it's definitely more the case now than it was in 08, 09.
Varsha, in terms of the direct booking, we have some indication from our survey on direct booking versus going to OTAs, etc.
Right. Our survey findings actually validate what Pranavi just said. As per our latest survey, around 55% of the bookings are made through direct channels for both hotels and airlines, while approximately 41% comes through third-party websites. So, I mean, that totally is in sync with what Pranavi just said.
I should remind the people who are watching that there's we can take some questions. I already have an audience question here, um, and please feel free to ask us other questions in the chat on LinkedIn here. It says, "What are your views on the luxury market?" I guess this is what Pranav, Varsha, you were mentioning in terms of the higher end of the market, and Pranav, you were mentioning too, which is that the higher end of the market in a recession generally holds well, just because and we've seen this certain during the pandemic that the rich got richer, and this is a general thing that happened and continue to spend.
Yeah, I can take this on luxury. Yeah, I think it's very interesting to look at the luxury market. Back in 08, 09, if you looked at pricing, luxury underperformed the overall market on pricing. But this time around, luxury has significantly outperformed the market. Pricing luxury is the only segment where pricing is actually above inflation rates. So we're seeing real pricing versus in other chain scales, it's kind of more in line with kind of inflation. So luxury pricing, yes, is gone through the roof. But if you look at occupancy on luxury, occupancy is still below 2019 levels, even though rates are higher, which suggests that there is still demand recovery for luxury to go. And I think, a lot of, Hyatt, Marriott have been talking about this, that they actually expect luxury pricing to stay sustainable into 2023, 2024. And they're seeing this great pricing reset happen essentially, because they think that luxury pricing was actually kind of stagnated post 08, 09, and is finally catching up to what it should be. And as that kind of occupancy catches up to 2019 levels, we'll see even further rate rises for luxury. So I mean, I'm very optimistic on luxury, and we're seeing that more hotel chains are leaning into luxury, and the unit growth is kind of if you look at kind of in construction, the hotels in construction as a percentage of their existing rooms, luxury is really being built the fastest. And that is kind of different to what we saw post 08, 09, when both pricing and kind of unit growth in luxury stagnated. So very different environment. And yeah, I'm very optimistic on the luxury market, even as we enter a recession.
This is another question. It says, what are your views on the TMC market specifically? So TMC is the travel management company. So I guess they're asking business travel question. Are you seeing any risk in the economic downturn? So this is what happens to the business travel sentiment, business traveler and business travel in potentially 2023. One of the things that we have been reporting on the Skift editorial side is that 2022 business travel peaked in US at about 85% pre-COVID. So 15% isn't there. And some of the people have started saying that this is the new normal. We're making it up, one, in terms of rates, of higher rates of the lost 15%. And two, the new types of travel that is coming in, as you mentioned, remote teams getting together. So there's new types of travel. Certainly we're seeing this in our company live we're totally remote company, new forms of travel. Our travel budgets on business travel are higher than they were, significantly higher than they were pre-COVID as a company itself, even though we don't have offices now. So there's that cost. So sentiment in terms of business travel, any of you?
I just have a data point to share here. Maybe that sheds some light. So basically, since Raf mentioned, we've been running this survey since January 2020. So I'm seeing the chart right now, and the business travel remains more or less flat. So in January 2020, almost 10% of the respondents were taking business trips, while in December 2022, it's reached 13%. So as per the data I have, it remains more. Obviously, there have been peaks and troughs throughout these last 3 years, but more or less it remains a little grim, I would say.
I think I would say that when kind of teleconferencing came onto the market, we had all these same questions, that business travel is dead, and it didn't die, it grew, year on year. And as Rafa has said, I think that the new use cases of business travel I think in the long term, should make up for that shortfall. And we've had companies like Hilton say that they expect business travel to fully recover by the end of 2022,
Right.
maybe into 2023, and that's a very explicit guidance point. And I think the fears for business travel are potentially a bit overdone, and I think those new use cases can fill up the void.
Yeah, let me put some more examples to it. So Hilton has been, Nasera, who's the CEO of Hilton, has been very upfront saying all the prognostications of death of business travel are crap. It's going to be not only will we recover, it'll be more than pre-COVID. And his evidence is the SMBs, which is small and medium-sized businesses, were the first ones to start traveling during COVID because they had no other choice. This is the way that they do business, face to face, and that will continue to drive the business travel recovery. You would assume that stays true in a recession as well. On the large company side, the layoffs that have happened, for instance, in tech, will definitely affect specific sectors like tech. Maybe it happens in finance. It hasn't the layoffs haven't been wide in the finance sector as they have been in the tech sector. So you would definitely see a chilling effect on business travel from large tech companies. So certainly that is there. The related question that we have is on business travel: do you see trends impacting live corporate events? Well, I hope they don't, because this is a huge part of our business, that we want people to come to our events. But again, 2020, 21, and 22 were so uncertain on events that I don't see how it'll be worse than it was in the COVID times in terms of events and uncertainty. I do think in many sectors the events have come back. The in-person events have come back in many different ways. Even though attendance isn't there, we've been doing research on the Skift meeting side, which is our meetings vertical, meetings.skift.com if you want to go and check it out. On that, the event attendance has topped in 2022 at about 65 to 75% of pre-COVID numbers. And so certainly, I don't think we'll go worse than that. And if anything, there's more understanding that, and the prices on the conferences and events have also adjusted this. I'm talking about paid events that people come to. So hopefully there'll be more demand for people to come to these events. That's what I hope. But certainly, if business travel gets crimped, traveling for corporate events gets shrunk as well. Let me move on to a couple of other questions. There's still a little bit of stuff we want to talk about, Varsha, on the behavior in the short-term rental market. That is an indicator of what how travelers' behavior has changed, and then we'll come to some of these last questions, and then we'll wrap up. So, Varsha, you want to talk about the short-term rental market?
Sure, Rafat. If you can get the last chart, please. Basically, if you can just look at this particular chart, it shows our survey findings, and which basically say that STR continue to show a very strong performance with a considerable uptick in December 2022 compared to 21 and 2020. I mean, December is obviously a time to visit friends and family, and STR just suits the boat. I mean, it's the best kind of accommodation to cater to this demand. But it'll be very interesting to see how STRs grow in 2023. But I mean, I would obviously want to mention, we've already published it in our Global Outlook report. As Skift Research, we actually are very positive about STR growing at around 10% in 2023 over 2022. And I think the industry is set to become almost around a $145 billion revenue throwing industry in 2023. So yeah, I mean, that's one major point that I would want to highlight.
Yeah, and I guess, sorry. I was just going to say, I guess if we do enter a recession, short-term rentals tend to outperform, and they tend to do better in recessions. And we saw that in 08, 09 as well. Hotels fell a lot more than short-term rentals did. They tend to be self-catered, and people tend to go towards kind of self-catered cottages, etc., to save some money there. So if there is a recession, we should see that short-term rentals should do really well.
one of the questions is actually let's do the we'll come to the China one last, and there's another question on the how do you think the digital nomad market and any impact there. Seth Borko, who's our senior research analyst as well, heads all of our data on the research side. He did a report last year. Pranavi, you probably remember this. Varsha, you probably remember this, but he did a market sizing of here's the U.S. digital nomad market. I think it was like $1 billion, if I remember right. We came up with numbers as just $1 billion market for digital nomads. Any sense? I mean, my sense. This is my sense of obviously in 2023, every few months there's a new push on. Okay, now people will come back to office. Okay, now people will come back to office. Okay, now people will come back to office. Certainly has not happened. And it still doesn't look like in 2023 for every prediction of at some point, even if when recession comes, people have no choice but to come to offices because then the employers have the upper hand. But that still has not happened. And so what does that mean for the digital nomad market? Do you have any thoughts on that, or are you seeing any numbers from your service?
Yeah, so actually, I do have some data to share here. And we asked the remote work status of Americans in our current survey. And the share of respondents actually working fully remotely or from home went up 4 percentage points from 24% in October 2022 to 28% in January 2023. So I would say that this, and also just as an additional data point, out of these respondents, almost 26% of them are taking extended vacations. I mean, which extended by extended vacations, I would mean vacations which are more than 10 days. So if we
Okay.
combine these two data points, I would say yes, the share of remote workers is increasing. Plus, people who are actually taking extended vacations, which would qualify for being a digital nomad, is also rising. It has actually picked up from around 22% mid last year, July 2022, to 26% already. So yes, it is on the rise as per what I see
So
through the
Pranavi,
survey.
you are an aspiring digital nomad. We know that. Your views on this.
Yeah, I mean,
You don't
it
have to if you don't have views on it, but I know you're aspiring to be digital nomad.
yeah, it's I feel lucky that it's come about kind of early on in my career, so I can do it. Yeah, I think it's definitely it's a big trend, and I don't think it's something that we can ignore. And I think a lot of brands are now getting into extended stay and trying to kind of capture these business travelers, these digital nomads, and I think it's a big trend that
Will
I'm really
continue.
looking forward to it. Yes, definitely.
Yeah, but in fact, a bunch of our team, especially the younger folks, are living the digital nomad life in many of our teams. So we'll obviously continue to see that. Last question. Let's get to this. On the China, obviously the big China question. Everybody's trying to figure out how the China travel evolves. In this case, this would be. I'm guessing this doesn't show up in the survey because we're talking U.S. traveler sentiment. This would be our estimation on the China travel outbound to US and obviously other parts of the world as well. It's still my sense is it's still very early. One of the things to watch out is are the Chinese traveler habits that were evolving prior to the pandemic, where they were moving away from groups because China travel, the boom started with the big group travel that happened, and was becoming more and more fully independent travel was coming into China. That had been happening for the last, I would say, 5 to 6, 7 years. And we've been tracking it on Skift. And the question is, where do the Chinese groups and Chinese independent travelers, do they stick in the region with Australia and Southeast Asia and those types of countries benefit? Dubai and Middle East, obviously trying for that as well. Or will the long haul to US and others, obviously the geopolitical issues are there in terms of what's happening with the US and China. So any sense of early indication, any sense of what the Chinese outbound travel will evolve? Any of you?
I mean,
Okay, well,
so
yeah.
Okay, go Pranavi.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I have any kind of hard data points on here, but yeah, I mean, if you look at kind of RevPAR in China, it's still down, yeah, like 30-40%. So domestically, China is still recovering. And, you know, we've seen that whenever restrictions eased in China, it just boomed. It would just recover immediately. And then unfortunately there would be restrictions again, and that's what would happen. So I think the moment restrictions are open, it will be domestic travel that comes back first, and that will just we'll see immediate effect there. And then I think kind of linking back to the question on luxury, Chinese, I mean, I think once Chinese travelers can travel again internationally, they've been kind of locked up for so many years that I think that pent up demand is just huge, and I think we will 100% see kind of the impact in the US as well, in Europe, in you know rest of Asia, and that will help continue. We'll continue seeing rising prices in luxury from these Chinese travelers. So I'm pretty optimistic on that.
One of the things that I guess we have to do another session on, just specifically on the China outbound, when the picture is a little more clear, because for now it's still so early that whatever we say could be right or wrong, because we have no idea, and so
Right.
still very early on that front. Varsha, did you have anything to add there?
Yes, I mean, just 2 points. So one is what we are seeing with respect to COVID policies. I mean, at least in the region, in the Asian regions, with respect to Chinese travelers, very harsh and strict policies are being put in place, which might hinder international travel, that too short haul. That's one. Second is today itself, Joe Biden gave a very strong statement on and against China as to
Right.
US might take an action. I mean, basically, what I'm trying to say is the political game and the political situation is really worsening in a way. That's a strong word to use, but I mean, that's the direction we are going in. So the game
Yeah.
is changing with respect to international borders, etc. So I would say these are like big bottlenecks that Chinese travelers will have to sort of,
We'll have
you
to
know,
overcome if something happens.
yes,
Even I saw something. There was another round of restrictions on in India that were put on some Chinese businesses. I'm forgetting exactly what was announced, but it was announced like in the last few days as well. So that will
right,
continue to play out in different countries, and that will probably trump anything that any positive news on the Chinese outbound travelers. And well, hopefully it doesn't, but likely it will. Okay, we should end it here. We promised it'll be 25 minutes. We're 33 minutes into it. I saw something, Brian. Can we throw up that 30% off if you want to subscribe to Skift Research? I saw a banner somewhere. Thank you very much. Enjoy 30% off a subscription of your choice with code Skift. Go to skift.com/get-access, or if you want to go directly to research.skift.com. The great work that Varsha and Pranavi and Wouter, who's our head of research, and Seth and Sania do, and more hires to come that are, by the way, we're also hiring as well. So if you go to our LinkedIn jobs page, where you're on LinkedIn, you'll see the jobs we're hiring for. Then please subscribe and get all this great work that our team does. All right, thank you very much. This was, I think it went fine. We'll keep doing this and learn and get better at it. And thank everyone who's been there for the last 35 minutes watching. We'll be back.
Thank you.